The intro works. So to be honest, of all the things that I remember about this movie, I did not remember that the first 10 seconds is solely dedicated to transporting stuff. Wait, so where is he? Greetings, ladies and gents. As you can guess from that intro, I am a huge fan of that scene, and today I want to explore and answer how many ships were at the Battle of Coruscant as seen in the Revenge of the Sith movie. To answer this question, I will be using the space battle as we see it in the movie, and I will also reference the 2008 Clone Wars TV series. Before I go into the math, I first want to talk about how I view my answer in the grand scheme of Star Wars. Is the answer I'm going to share with you today the definitive answer to how many ships were at the Battle of Coruscant? Well, maybe. If George Lucas or Dave Filoni ever decide to give a specific answer, I would take their number over mine. My approach to this is, how would I answer this question for my friends during a conversation at lunch? And yes, I am the type of person that thinks this is a fun conversation and also appropriate for lunch. Alright, let's now get on to solving this. The first thing I wanted to know is what formation these ships were arranged in. To answer this, I referenced the 2008 Clone Wars TV show to understand General Grievous' strategy and tactics. In the episode Grievous Intrigue, my favorite Kaleesh warrior organized his ships in a diamond formation and placed his command ship in the front. In ARC Troopers, General Grievous organized his ships in a circular formation with munificent frigates in front, recusants behind, Lucrehulks in the back, and his flagship in the center. In both instances, we see General Grievous organizes his fleet in a geometric shape and places himself where he thinks he wants or needs to be. In front for aggression, or in the center when attacking a Republic stronghold, or just to protect himself, as in the case with this particular scene. Personally, I don't think General Grievous has done anything I wouldn't do in my Empire at War campaigns. Just saying, just throwing that out there. As we all know, General Grievous' objective was to abduct Chancellor Palpatine. So I think Grievous would have had his flagship more or less in the center of his fleet. It makes the most sense and would allow Grievous to move his ship away and also move any reserve ships to areas that have the heaviest fighting, while protecting his ship from every angle. This might seem obvious, but I want to show more evidence for a circular formation being used because most equations I will show you later involve circles, so I felt it was very important to prove that. Now that I've explained why I think the Separatist fleet was in a circle, I want to step further and assumed that the battle was happening in a spherical shape too. From the opening scene, it is very clear the battle is happening at multiple levels of space. For the most part, we are only shown action happening beneath Anakin, Obi-Wan, but I think it's fair to assume some action was going on above them as well. Otherwise, I think General Grievous could have jumped to hyperspace already, or Republic reinforcements would have come out from above and had a direct shot at Grievous' flagship. Okay, now that I've explained why I'm pretty confident that the fleet and that the battle is happening in a sphere, there are two basic things we need to find out. First, the radius. This number is essential for every formula involving a circle. Second, we need to know the proportion of how many ships were present. To answer both questions, I will be referencing the same portion of the film, the scene where the Jedi starfighters are traveling in a mostly straight line, specifically between 2 minutes and 4 seconds and 3 minutes and 36 seconds in the film's runtime. The mostly straight line will be our radius, and solving for it is actually pretty simple. We need to know the speed of the starfighters, and to do that, we need them to travel a specific distance, like the distance of a star destroyer or frigate, and divide that number by the time it took to travel the distance. When I was solving this, I wanted to use a Venator Star Destroyer, but I didn't find a scene where they flew the length of a Venator in a straight line, and one that could also see the tip of the bow and stern. So instead, I used a Munificent frigate, and fortunately, those ships have the exact same length, both in Star Wars canon and in Legends, and that length is 825 meters. After the length comes the time. These Jedi are with this particular frigate from the times 2 minutes and 17 seconds and 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So the math is pretty simple there, 3 seconds of screen time. We divide 825 by 3 and we are left with 275 meters per second squared, or 615 miles per hour. The final step to solving for the radius is finding out how long it took for Anakin Obi-Wan to travel from the perimeter of the battlefield to the center, where General Grievous is. For this, I took the time from shot 2 minutes and 4 seconds to 3 minutes and 36 seconds. So why did I choose those times? Anakin Obi-Wan didn't land on the flagship until 3 minutes later. Well, before the scene at 2 minutes and 4 seconds, there is no action going on, there's no fighting, so it's pretty clear they're not in the combat zone. I only counted the time to 3 minutes and 36 seconds because by that scene they essentially run into the flagship, but were distracted by Separatist starfighters for the next 3 minutes of the film's runtime. Now that I've explained why I have the times that we do, the math is actually pretty simple. The difference between 2 minutes and 4 seconds and 3 minutes and 36 seconds is 92 seconds. 92 seconds times 275 meters per second gives us a distance of 25,300 meters, or 15.7 miles. Honestly, that number is a lot smaller than I was expecting, but I guess that's part of what makes space battles amazing. You can have so much going on in what is actually a pretty small space. And don't worry, even though the space is small, or smaller than I expected, the number is actually pretty big. And I can tell you right now, each side has over 10,000 ships. So continuing on, from the radius, we can find out everything we need to know about how much room this battle occupied. Now we need to find out how many ships were on each side of the battle and how those ships were distributed, meaning how many of each type. Before I go further, I need to explain an assumption. I assume that the number of ships that we saw as the camera was following Obi-Wan and Anakin was representative of what any other Jedi or clone pilot would have seen. So I'm taking that footage as a sample of what would have been seen anywhere else that day in that battle. Alright, for the number of ships, I counted every ship I saw between those 92 seconds of film. I did count these myself, so I admit there could be room for error. Alright, now with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's start with the Separatist fleet. I counted 26 Munificent star frigates, 7 recruisant cruisers, 15 Lucrehulk capital ships, and 1 Providence-class battleship. There were 2 things that surprised me. First, the number of Lucrehulks. I knew there were a few, but I didn't know there were that many, so that adds a lot of firepower and armor to the Separatist fleet, so they won't go down as easily. The second thing that surprised me was the number of Providence-class capital ships. The only one that I could find was Grievous's flagship. I think this is the case for story purposes. It makes sense. The Separatists have several different starship types, and the main villain's flagship needs to be distinguished from the other ships on screen. In light of that, I'm going to add an extra one to this total, because I think it's reasonable to assume that there was at least one more present for 2 reasons. 1, additional firepower, and 2, I think it would help confuse any potential rescue efforts and also intimidate the Republic from potentially firing on that vessel. So I think it makes good tactical sense. Counting the Republic ships was much easier, since I only had to count the Venators. I counted 37, making it the most frequently seen starship to appear in the sequence. I also noticed something really cool while counting these. Often the vendors appear 4 at a time and in a V-shaped formation. Not only does that look cool, but it makes tactical sense. The destroyers can engage as a combined unit and then pair off to pursue fleeing vessels and still offer covering support to each other. I think it's brilliant. This also makes a lot of sense to me because often in the Clone Wars TV show, I recall often seeing Republic fleets around this size. Sometimes we'd see larger fleets, like at the Battle of Camino in the episode Arc Troopers, but that was an exception. Going a step further, we know the Republic was spread throughout the Outer Rim, so I think these formations represent all these individual fleets coming back to defeat the Separatists at Coruscant. I doubt George Lucas intended to do this, but one thing's for sure, no one makes Star Wars like George. Now back to the math, and I promise you we are on the home stretch now. With the radius and the number of ships, it is possible to get an estimate of the total number of ships that would have been there. First, I'm going to divide the radius by the numbers of ships. This will tell us how many ships we would have seen for any amount of space or distance traveled. To keep this simple, I've created a table to show you the results for each ship type. With this chart, we know how many ships of each kind we would encounter if we were flying in a straight line. However, we can do more than that. If we use this number as a radius in the volume of a sphere, it will tell us how many ships we'd expect to find in X amount of space of this battle. If I divide the total volume of the whole battlefield by these numbers per ship, the results will be the number of ships we would expect to see through the entire battle. I will demonstrate this calculation for the Venator Star Destroyers, and then I will show a chart for the remaining Separatist fleet ships and their total number. First, we find the volume of the space battle by using the 25,300 meters in the volume of a sphere. So we're plugging in that number into the equation. The result is 67.8 quintillion meters cubed. Basically, a ton of space. And I promise I didn't make up quintillion. That is just a number where there are 5 sets of 3 zeros before we finally get to non-zero numbers. So basically a ton of space. Next, the volume of how often we expect to find one Venator. Traveling in a straight line, we'd expect to find one of these cruisers for every 683 meters we travel. This is now the radius we're going to plug into this volume equation again. This will tell us how many Venators we would find for X amount of space in this battle. In this case, the number is 1.3 billion cubic meters. If we then divide the total volume of the battlefield, which was the 67.8 quintillion, by this number, the result is the number of Venators we would expect to see. And that number is 50,977. All right, so moving on, to keep things simple, I went ahead and created a chart for all the Separatist ships. This way, you don't have to listen to me rattle on about this number many times larger than a million being divided by numbers that are also really big. So there you have it. For the Republic, I estimated there are the 50,977 Venators. And then for the Separatists, I estimate there were 17,564 munificent frigates, 342 recusant cruisers, 8 Providence-class battleships, 3,373 Lucrehulk capital ships. In total, this results for the Separatists of 21,287 for them. In total, between both sides, that is 72,264 starships. But for the sake of the final answer, I'm going to round this down to 72,000 starships in total participated in the Battle of Coruscant. And 70% of those were for the Republic, and those were the Venators. 24.3% were the Munificents. 4.6% were Lucrehulks. And remember, those are those big, massive ships. And then less than 1% for both the Recusants and Providence class battleships. So those particular two didn't make up a whole lot of the overall fleet. And as a final reminder about these numbers, these are based on the quantity of ships shown in the movie at its root, at its core. Personally, I like to imagine more Recusants and Providence class battleships being there. That's what the numbers lead me to believe. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. I know math isn't the most exciting thing to sit through, but I love it because now we can actually have a conversation about what was going on that day in this battle. At first glance, it seems like the Republic will win, but in the 2008 Clone Wars show, they routinely mentioned that Separatist ships have greater firepower than Venators. And remember that 1 in 7 Separatist ships present are the Lucrehulks, those massive capital ships with tons of starfighters on board. Just trying to say it's not as hopeless for the Separatists as it seems. I also want to comment on the sheer number of Republic vessels present, since in my calculations they account for over 70% of the total ships. The Separatist fleet was probably much more numerous when the battle started, but by the time Anakin and Obi-Wan showed up, a significant portion was destroyed. And it's also important to remember the goal of the battle was to capture Chancellor Palpatine. It wasn't to take the planet. In the end, I think it's clear that the Republic would have won the battle and the war, but if this battle had never happened, it probably would have gone on much longer. Again, thank you everyone for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. If you really enjoyed this video, please give me a like and maybe consider sharing it with a friend who's maybe also always had this question too. If you didn't like the video, that's cool. Feel free to drop a dislike and let me know why in the comments. And if you want to hear more from me in the future, go ahead and subscribe. I've been thinking a lot about what I want this channel to be about, and so in my next video, I want to detail more of that as well. And again, guys, thanks for watching, and stay nerdy.